I teach our junior level class, and we spend a lot of time thinking about this principle of representing diverse perspectives, characters, and authors, and really thinking about what all perspectives are out there in the world. So we focus on the metaphor by Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop. She wrote about in 1990, texts as windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. And we do that primarily through course readings, but also with children's literature through many read alouds, and my students engage in literature circles. So on the next slide, I have for you just an example of some of the children's literature that I read to my class. I like to read to them just about every day. And we use these texts for our curriculum to talk about things like comprehension strategies, metacognitive awareness, read alouds, think alouds, word study, fluency, mentor texts for writing. But I purposely choose texts that really represent diverse characters and authors and themes, such as gender equality, examining who holds powers in our systems, thinking about racial equity, LGBTQ joy, Black joy, illness, poverty, food insecurity, historical oppression, adoption, religion, all kinds of ways that people can be beautifully diverse. On the next slide, I have an example of the text that my students use as we engage in literature circles. And this is a way for my students to really practice analyzing a text, annotating a text as a teacher, thinking about text as a writer, but they also get to engage in the practice of literature circles and see what rich discussions can really come out of text, even upper elementary texts for college students. I do have to be really selective in the texts that I choose because they have to be rich with topics that college students will find interesting enough to talk about. Usually we do 5 half-hour sessions for one upper elementary novel. So there has to be enough meat there. And I like to choose texts that have themes such as, again, neurodiversity, gender identity, race, culture, language, civil rights, activism. I think it's important that I choose those books for my students, but another aspect of choice that's really important is, of course, that my students have a lot of choice in choosing. They get to do a little survey, and I give them usually their first choice. And they're really invested, and they very much enjoy this project because they get to see these diverse perspectives that they maybe hadn't been reading or living, getting to know someone with this perspective, and they also get to chat about it with their peers. Something that we talk about that I think is really, really important is what background and life experiences am I missing as a reader that could help me better understand the context of this text. And my students also consider the implications of having someone in their group or not having someone in their literature circle group that can relate personally to some of the things that the character is going through. And we talk about, if there is someone in our group that can relate personally, we risk tokenizing them, asking them to speak for their group. And yet, if there's not someone in our group, we risk stereotyping that group. And so in order to combat that, through student suggestions over the years, I've added a literature circle role called the background bringer. Laura, if you could try to click that. I don't know if it'll come up for them, but I have a number of slides here, and these are just examples of questions that they might research as they're in their background bringer role. And they can research any topic that they would like, but this gets them started thinking about okay, what could I research and bring to this group that will really help us have further context for understanding the rich diversity in this text that I might not be able to personally relate to. Thank you. And that's linked there. And on the next slide, other just topics that we make sure to talk about in the junior level course. We talk about critical literacy specifically. I define it for students, thinking about that relationship between language and the power it can hold, and analyzing and evaluating the meaning of text with a lens toward taking that critical stance and maybe even ensuing action. And we think about whose voice is missing. We talk about current events. We really think about the critical lenses that we showed at the beginning of the presentation, and consider multiple lenses every time we have sort of a, what would you do in this situation? The students begin to see that they have to simultaneously consider multiple lenses. They have to consider their own identity and what they're bringing, but also their relationship with the community and those relationships, and that stance of anti-racism and social justice, among other lenses. And we've also done service learning in this class, promoting rich text in schools. And I like to use just a few chapters from this text on the slide, Unpack Your Impact by O'Brien and Tab. It's two teachers who just decided to take it upon themselves to do better as far as making sure that what they were teaching students was culturally responsive and anti-racist. And so it kind of goes through their journey and their tips and tricks based on what they learned. And on my last slide, I have some additional resources that I use in the class, such as TED Talks that my students find really powerful.